of journalism, welcome to Global Journalist. I'm David Reed. When two high-speed trains collided on a bridge in southwestern China, the first report from the scene came from a victim, 1 minute later. Her Twitter-style post ended with a dramatic cry for help. Eventually, state media revealed that about 35 people were killed in the crash and more than 210 were injured. The microblogs were effective in gathering help from people who donated blood and money. Citizens also flooded the microblogs with messages criticizing officials for letting the accident happen in the first place and then badly responding to the disaster. Homegrown social media outlets are thriving in China, and microblogs have vexed government officials with rapid and widespread dissemination of news. The number of people using microblogs, known as Weibo, has grown 300% from a year ago to more than 250 million. One reason for the popularity and the unusually free expression is that Weibo users have been able to post anonymously. However, that started changing this month in China's major cities. Microbloggers must register on the Weibo platform using their real identities or face unspecified legal consequences. Our guests today on Global Journalist are speaking to us from inside China and will provide first-hand accounts of the microblogging phenomenon and discuss the impact of the state's crackdown. Michael Ante is an independent blogger and reports on international affairs for Chinese and English media outlets. He won a prestigious media award last year and received international attention recently when Facebook blocked his account because he uses his pen name and not his state-registered name. And Lucy Hornby is a correspondent for Reuters, who has reported from Beijing and Shanghai since 2004. Welcome to Global Journalist.
Thank you.
Good to have you. But let me put this topic in perspective. From what I understand, Communist Party censors completely control the content of newspapers and TV stations in China, and most international radio news programs are scrambled. Sensitive broadcasts of BBC and CNN are blacked out, as are social media sites Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So, Lucy, how does the government manage this level of information suppression?
Well, it's pretty multifaceted. For the more traditional media, most of the editors have a sort of sense of what might be sensitive versus what might be allowed. To give them credit, they try to push the envelope, but they also know what's going to cause trouble. So there's self-censorship. There are also orders from on high to avoid certain topics. And then if, for some reason, a topic does get into a paper, you can have consequences either individually for the reporter or the editor or overall for the media organization.
Right. And Michael, microblogs have been flying under the radar somewhat more. But before we get into your experiences as a blogger and the new rules, let's talk about a few of the high-profile examples of Weibo users breaking news stories. And Lisa, feel free to jump in. What are some cases that where this has becoming a big deal?
I think the train crash accident you mentioned is a milestone for the news breaking, because before you will see that even we traditional media, the journalists try very hard to push the envelope. But here they have very strong, self-censorship and know what will happening after they post the dangerous content. But the nature of Web 2.0 of microblogging is decentralized information. Basically, you gave the users a little bit of freedom to post their information. So it changed a lot, especially like the example of the train crash. 2 years ago, they also had the same train crash in the southern province. But the national people or audience only get news 2 days after accident, and they already buried the train. It's literally buried the train. So I think bury the train is a tradition. But this time, the microblogging, the live reporting the accident, even before the accident happened, because when the train stopped, they already fear something happened. They post pictures online. So that the national audience know. So you can't, when again the Chinese authorities want to bury the train, you amidst the criticism, in the fifth 5 day, there is almost no censorship on the particular case. So there are about 10 million criticism on this case online. So that's the huge, it never happened before in the history. And recently, you also found a very, very big news is about the Chongqing Bolshoi, the political struggle between Chongqing faction and the Beijing authorities. So that particular news also almost live tweeting from at the very beginning on the Weibo. So basically, Chinese netizens now just like watch dramas.
Right.
Every day go on the microblog to watch what is going on happen in Chongqing and Beijing. You were never expected to happen before.
Right. And Lucy, I understand that there's been some good and some in this also. Police have solved some cases because of microblogs, and citizens have exposed instances of official corruption or foul play, and also being used to donate, used to mobilize Chinese to donate money to people in need. Can you give some other examples of the impact of microblogging on both journalism and civil society?
Well, in terms of civil society, I think one very moving case that's gotten a lot of attention in China, there's a problem here with children who are kidnapped, and some people have been able to harness the power of Weibo, the fact that so many people see it, to try to publicize those cases, publicize photos of children maybe begging in the streets who they think might be kidnapping victims. So far, not many parents have gotten their children back, but it's almost analogous to the milk carton photos that we had back in the U.S. in the 80s and 90s. That it was a way to take a child who's disappeared, who you just can't find, and publicize it so that you can help crowdsource trying to get them back. So I think that's a very moving evidence of the power of Weibo.
Right. And to widen the perspective a bit, the Chinese Internet Network Information Center says that nearly half of the Chinese internet population uses Weibo. Its report said that by the end of December, there were 513 million internet users in China, representing an internet penetration of 38%. And Michael, you have 50,000 followers. Is that right? What's driving this massive?
On Twitter. Yeah.
What's driving this massive use of social media in China? First, Michael, then Lucy.
Yes, first I should point out the differences between the Chinese language microblogging, including Twitter and Xingnan Weibo, and the English the version of Twitter.
How it's different than Twitter?
We have we have the limitation, the 140 characters. That for English language, that means about 140 letters, right? It's like
right.
20 words, a sentence. But for Chinese, it's 140 characters. That means a paragraph. That means a story. You basically can tell everything about the 5 elements of journalism. So people in China, from the very beginning when the Twitter and the Twitter copycat was introduced in the market, Chinese people use it more like a media than the social tool. So that's firstly the Chinese so love the Twittering and the microblogging, because that can offer much information, but also because it's accessible. You just can't have a cell phone, to read all the news you want, and also we lack very good traditional media, which like the United States, we lack of that because there is no freedom of press, so people have self-censorship in the traditional media. Now the microblogging gave the journalists themselves involvement within the blog sphere and give more frank information than they printed on the printed media. So now the microblog is the best trustful media platform in China. That's why half of the Chinese netizens already go on Weibo to have fun or get information.
And Lucy, do you agree that people generally believe Weibo posts more than commercial newspapers and other media sources?
Yes, I think that's true. Although one of the problems for us as foreign media is that you have to be extremely careful with the information on Weibo. Rumors can sweep through Weibo at a speed that you would not believe. And so just like there are, guidelines for picking anything up off Twitter, you actually have to be even more careful on Weibo because while there is a lot of good breaking news there are also rumors that are entirely unsubstantiated. But you might find, 10,000 people repeating them, and with what appear to be eyewitness accounts. So it's a very dicey thing to use as a news gathering tool. You have to be extremely careful of what's there.
And they also can, like with video, they can date stamp it, right? If they link to video, and I presume they can also link the Twitter post to photos and video.
Well, actually, one of the strengths of Weibo compared to Twitter is that you can upload photos directly. So that actually is helpful for us as news gathering because people can, let's say somebody posts that there's a protest in this town, and they upload a photo, and then you can look at the photo and you can say, oh, there are 10,000 or 20,000 people, this is a big deal. Or you can see, oh, there seem to be 20 people there, not a big deal. But on the other hand, you do have to be careful because, again, you have to be reasonably sure that the photo is, in fact, showing what it says it's showing. And some users, in their enthusiasm, will load up what I can only say would be related photos, but not actually of the event they're talking about.
Let's talk about before we get into the impact. Michael and then Lucy, how are the microbloggers reacting to the identity rule? Are they
You mean a new
the new rule where you have to use your identity? Are they
rename policy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think people first try very hard to find an alternative way to register. For example, the Xingnan Weibo, some people find if you have the cell phone, you register in the cell phone application, they were easily to attach you with the real name registration. Even you didn't have any real name registered with the cell phone because sometimes the company finds some policy to have an alternative way to offer you to do because otherwise it's so hard. According to Xingnan Weibo, we have more than 250 million users, right? If everyone is by the law, by the regulation to register their real name with the account, it's almost like mission impossible. So the people, including not only user but also company, now try to find an alternative way. But when things going by, you see some new breaking news happen. You start to find people realize the real name, whether real name is not, it's not the crucial thing, and the people on the opposite, people more dare to say because you think you already get my information. What's the hair? You can get the rest. So you little bit you find a little backfire from the netizen who really want to try to access the Weibo because Weibo now is the major platform, media and the communication platform for people. People just can't give up. So why not just be braver to talk more directly if you already have my name?
Lucy,
sometimes people, the intention of this regulation who really want to limit the freedom of speech of people, sometimes they hit their own wall.
Okay, Lucy, do you agree that the identification policy change is not going to have a big impact, and or do you think it will stifle free expression, or some people who are afraid to give their names?
I think at the moment it's a little early to tell, but I do feel that if there were significant prosecution or persecution of somebody for what, or of many people for what they were posting, I think it could have a really chilling effect. I mean, it's one thing if you're already a public figure, if you're already known for taking a bit of a, edgy stance. But on the other hand, if you're somebody who's a normal office worker, a homeowner, you've got a kid, you're married, you're just a very, very normal, anonymous person. You might have felt free in the past to add a snarky remark or forward something to your followers that is quite edgy or sensitive. If you start seeing people being persecuted for doing that, I think that you're going to see a real chilling effect on other people who are otherwise anonymous citizens, who are not public, known figures.
Right. So it's only been a few weeks or less than 2 weeks. So
not even, yeah.
Right. And tell it what is Lucy then Michael? What is the government's rationale? What are they saying on state media and in their own statements about why they're doing this?
Doing what?
Requiring microbloggers to give their real names. What is their reasoning?
My take is the more and more, because now the Weibo and microblog play a very important role in the public opinion. So Chinese communists have a very old saying they call this media, including the internet, as the battlefield of public opinion. And they say, if we didn't occupy that, the enemy will occupy. The enemy means, foreigners, dissidents, or United States. So basically, their policy is occupy the battlefield of the public opinion, including microblog. So how to occupy? I think from their thinking to real name policy is one of the best way to have everyone's data in hand. But sometimes it's not only by real the meaning, because even before real name policy, the Chinese authority can get any data, whatever you post. Real name policy is just like a public warning. So let your data is in my hand, because before you don't know. Why people don't know something, or they were registered in the government? Why it become a threat? Because people, when they post articles, maybe yes, they can be persecuted before, but when more and more people do that without warning, in China, if more than 10,000 people broken law, the law basically doesn't work. So
right.
you can't have so many people breaking the regulation. So this kind of public warning is just like to set more self-censorship to you, instead of really changing the persecution process, because it doesn't change at all. But my point is,
okay,
more and more breaking news is happen publicly by public figures, not by anonymous figure. So I doubt it can work, regulation. Eventually even have its backfire.
Okay. Lucy, what's your take on that, on what the government says the reason they're doing this and their actual reasons?
I completely agree with Michael in terms of the actual reason. The official reason, I believe, is to prevent rumors from spreading.
And I also read some more about objectionable, immoral posts. Is that also part of it?
Yeah, I mean that has been the rationale for crackdown on the internet altogether for many years. Is that we're cracking down on pornography.
So the government has also been pretty aggressive in using this Weibo to communicate with the people. And are they listening? Are actions being taken based on the back and forth on Weibo?
Yeah, absolutely. You can see when a rumor goes on Weibo.
Hold on a second, you guys are both talking. Lucy, let's set Michael, then you can jump in, Lucy. Michael, what were you saying?
I want to say the Occupy means they themselves also should be part of the Weibo, right? And they do that. But the effect I don't think is so good because the authority really wants some centralized news, spreading communication way. But Weibo microblog basically is a decentralized information platform. So people don't listen to you. Even, for example, in a recent campaign about Leifeng, it's a moral model they want people to follow. People just joke at that. Even the official, accounts, published all the good words about that, but people just refuse to do that. You cannot force people to love your tweets. It's so ridiculous.
Okay. Lucy?
You had asked whether the government responds to what's on Weibo, and I would say absolutely they do. I mean, when you see something racing through Weibo, you will often, within about 24 hours, you will see the official media address the issue in some way. Either they'll admit it happened, or they'll issue a denial, or they'll issue an apparently unrelated news story that nonetheless, let's say there was a rumor somebody had been detained. Suddenly you'll see that person in the official media showing up at some very minor ceremony. So clearly they're monitoring it closely and responding very much to the discussion that's coursing through Weibo.
Okay. Before we continue our discussion, I want to remind everyone that you can view or listen to this program anytime by downloading our podcasts at globaljournalist.org. You can also find interesting articles, photos, and interviews related to today's program on our website. So please send us questions or comments via globaljournalist@kbia.org or our Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at GJJournalist. So I wanted to bring this down to a more civic level. Lucille, just following up on what you just said, and Michael, you can jump in after Lucy. When say there's local government problem of maybe some flooding, and Weibo brings the problem to light, is it causing governments to actually take action to fix problems?
Yes, I think they'll move to address an issue faster if it appears to be something that's gaining traction on Weibo.
And Michael, have you?
Yes, because the Weibo basically is a central media. It looks like a internet era CCTV, the central TV station. So for a local government, it's so hard for you to delete the Weibo posts. So you need the central government to act. So sometimes, Weibo become a platform both for individuals to petition to the central government against local corruption, and for the central government want to mobilize the people to criticize local corruption. So that you see more and more cases happen. Central government sometimes give a little bit of window of freedom of speech, let people to just criticize the local government. And even for the People's Daily, this very central traditional media, they even have monthly digest of the Weibo post and ranking every provinces into the numbers of criticism they get, and report it to the central government. If you are so bad in this kind of ranking, your officials' promotion chances were so limited in the end of the year. So they more and more regard the Weibo as a central public opinion collector to monitor the local officials. It is a very new trend that other government never used that, because that's the first time Chinese government utilized Weibo not only as censorship, but also as a governing tool.
So they're essentially,
particularly for central government.
So essentially, what you're saying, Michael, is they're sort of voting with their Weibos.
Voting, because just like a complaint, it's a complaining.
Yes. Okay.
It's in the background of there are not very effective surveys in China. So there's actually no good way to monitor public opinion here, unlike the U.S., where you have surveys of the population on every conceivable topic on a regular basis, especially during an election year. In China, there aren't these comprehensive surveys. So actually, it's a useful tool for feedback for the government. And you also have many government bureaus that have opened their own Weibo accounts and are using it, just sort of like a corporate website in the U.S. might use their website to promote their company. Local governments sometimes have their own sort of Weibo spokespresence. So it's not something that the government is not engaging with. The government is very much engaging with it.
We have about a minute left, so I just want to briefly get into one last question, and that is, what's the future here? I've read that there's really not a mature business model formed for Weibo, and it's still a money-burning venture and not making money. Lucy, real quick, and then Michael, what's the future? Is it going to keep growing, or what are your thoughts?
I think Michael's probably better to answer that than I am, but certainly in other countries, people have harnessed social media very effectively for advertising, for buzz creation. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't also be the case in China.
And Michael, we have about 20 seconds. What's your take on?
Yes, I think but eventually the people should meet the need of the Chinese people's social networking, right? So I think in the long term we're doing better, but problem is real name policy, and even now the political struggles sometimes will give the shadow to the future of the Sina Weibo.
Great. Well, we've come to the end of this week's edition of Global Journalist, produced by the Reynolds Journalism Institute and the Missouri School of Journalism. Joining us today from Beijing were Michael Ante, an independent blogger and columnist, and Reuters correspondent Lucy Hornby. I think I really appreciate the conversation. I've learned a lot, and I appreciate you guys taking your time to give us some insight on this. Global Journalist, thank you. Global Journalist is directed by Travis McMillan, audio by Pat Akers. Raymond Tungakar is our executive producer. Camille Phillips was the lead producer, assisted by Molly Bullock, Ning Pham, and Yo-Yo Joe. Now stay tuned for Free Press Watch and join us again next week for another Global Journalist. I'm David Reed.
And now, Free Press Watch, a segment on Global Journalist where each week we bring you a rundown of major events affecting press freedom around the world. I'm Camille Phillips. Today's news comes from the Knight Center for Journalism in the Americas, Committee to Protect Journalists, and Reporters Without Borders. In Syria, freelance journalist Rudy Othman was beaten and arrested while covering a protest in Damascus. This is the third time Othman has been detained by Syrian authorities. Last October, it took 4 months for his release, although he was never charged. In Brazil last week, the anchor of TV Cuiabá received an injunction against criticizing the governor of Mato Grosso. If he does not comply, he will be fined approximately $2,800 per day. In Nigeria, journalist Ahmad Salkida says he fears for his life. Salkida received phone calls accusing him of negotiating a truce between terrorist organization Boko Haram and the government. Salkida was followed by a government vehicle for several hours last week. He has been reporting on Boko Haram's activities since 2006. For more information on these and other events affecting press freedom around the world, please visit our website at globaljournalist.org. Thank you for joining us this week on Global Journalist. I'm Camille Phillips. See you next week.